You know, making movies is never easy. It takes a village, as the old saying goes. And of course, some of them have harder production cycles than others, with tons of production issues going into it that almost stop the film. Nevertheless, some of these are able to rise up against these issues and actually manage to be seen by the general public. Sometimes that's a good thing, other times that's not a good thing at all, and they probably should have stayed gone. But one of these films that not only overcame the production issues, but had everyone, almost, on board saying that it was entirely worth it, was Heathers. We all know about Heathers, don't we? Well, for a little while, I did know about it, but I hadn't seen it. More on that in a minute. Heathers is an extremely popular black comedy film that came out in 1988, and it's about, well, this is kind of intense, it's about this girl named Veronica who gets in this clique in a high school with 3 girls named Heather. They're all pretty snobby, pretty elitist, and think they're better than everyone else. She falls in love with this degenerate guy named JD, and they accidentally kill one of the Heathers, and they have to cover it up. And then it all snowballs from there. Despite being such a dark film, I found this really enjoyable. When I saw it for the first time, I knew exactly what I was getting into, but even then, I was still floored. It's like if John Hughes finally snapped. It captures the style of his films perfectly, while also having its own distinct voice and style. It's also a shock film that doesn't rely solely on shock. It has character development, it has actual clever dialogue, not just shocking material. That way, the shocking material stays funny, and you don't get tired of it. That's one of the things I love about Heathers. So naturally, when I am interested in something, I tend to look up its story. And oh man, how did this film even get made? So many things went wrong with the production here that it's a miracle that we've ever even seen it. What happened? And why was Heathers able to persevere? Well, let me show you. This is Heathers, the little film that could. First of all, Heathers was written by Daniel Waters, who, let's get this right off the bat here, was a freshman filmmaker. He had never written a script before. He'd never made a film before. In his mind, he thought you write a script, you make a movie, and bam, it comes into being. That's not how it works. First of all, he had an ideal director in mind. Stanley Kubrick, the guy that made A Clockwork Orange, 2001: Space Odyssey, Full Metal Jacket, and so forth. In fact, he was such a big fan of Kubrick that he decided to write a whole bunch of homages to his work in Heathers itself. That, and also he thought Kubrick would excel with the dark subject matter. But there was a problem. Kubrick never even got the script. No matter how many times Waters kept trying to give it to him, it didn't work. Kubrick never got it. So, he had to go to another director, Michael Lehman, who was actually very passionate about the film. He thought it had a lot of potential, so he agreed to help out. Then the two began shopping it around to all kinds of production studios. And another problem came up. The film script was labeled as toxic and unfilmable. Why? I mean, have you seen the film? It has AIDS jokes, date rape jokes, it's about 2 teenagers committing murders and then covering them up as suicides and getting some kind of thrill out of it. I mean, today already that wouldn't fly, but in the 1980s, definitely not. One of the biggest issues they came across was the ending to the film. The climax of Heathers is about JD, the degenerate guy, snapping even further than he already has, deciding to blow up Westerberg High School with a time bomb. In the final cut of the film that we've all seen, he actually somewhat reforms and blows himself up. However, in the original version, he doesn't do that. He wins, everyone dies, and they all have some kind of weird ghost prom in heaven. Admittedly, that would have been interesting to see, but I don't think it really would have been all too satisfying. See, with the dark subject matter and totally bizarre tone that Heathers had, I feel like it kinda needed the ending it ended up with. With Veronica ditching the Heathers group and somewhat reforming, getting a somewhat happy ending with an ambiguous twist. That punch to Heather Duke's ego felt a lot better than getting her killed. Having Veronica come out on top and leaving JD actually felt good rather than her dying along with everyone else. It's not like Little Shop of Horrors where it goes right along with the metaphor. Nah, this one I think suits the story better. Eventually, they came across New World Pictures, who agreed to finance the film if they changed the ending. Waters kept fighting and fighting and fighting some more to keep that ending in, but no, they would not budge. So he ended up rewriting it to the one we've all seen, and then Heathers was able to be made with no issues, no difficulties, none of that whatsoever. He lied through his teeth. Casting the film was impossible. This was a lot like Misery, where people kept turning down the role of Paul Sheldon, only this time, instead of turning down the role of Paul Sheldon, they turned down the role of everybody! No one wanted to be in this film. Because, again, it was seen as toxic, unfilmable, and damaging to the careers of the people who'd be involved in it. It was seen as so taboo that a bunch of people believed that this would be the one movie that would kill their career should they even think about auditioning for it. Quite possibly the most difficult role of them all to cast was the lead character, Veronica. See, they approached several young actresses that would have been perfect for the role, but they all turned it down because, well, they want to work. Irony of all ironies here, Winona Ryder was one of the few who actually wanted to be a part of it, but they turned her down because she wasn't pretty enough, apparently. So, she ended up getting a makeover, and then they considered her for the part, and wouldn't you know it, she ended up getting it. Despite the fact that her manager actually got down on their knees and begged her not to take it. But she did it anyways. Not that many people read for the part of JD, one of them actually was Brad Pitt, but in the end, despite all odds and despite the fact he didn't think he'd get it himself, Christian Slater was cast. And they also cast his girlfriend, Kim Walker, as Heather Chandler. Speaking of Heather Chandler, that one was also a mess to cast. You see, originally, the role of Heather Chandler was offered to Heather Graham. I know, Heather playing Heather, that would have been great, but she turned it down. So, instead she was cast as Heather McNamara, but her mother refused to let her accept the role. I mean, I get that. I wouldn't want my kid acting in this when they're only 17, but still. That's kind of a low blow, and that's really unfortunate to the production. Shannen Doherty wanted the part of Veronica, but of course, as we mentioned earlier, Winona Ryder was already cast as that role, so they wanted to cast her as Heather Chandler, but she said no, and she wanted the role of Heather Duke, which she ended up getting. And that proved to be an interesting experience. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but Shannen Doherty was a very big menace on the set. She didn't understand the film, she was taking herself way too seriously, she wanted a bunch of rewrites, she refused to do a lot of the dirtier scenes and say filthy words, and in fact, when the film was premiering and the cast was seeing the final product for the first time, she ran out of the theater in tears because she thought Heathers, get this, was a drama film and not a dark comedy. Did she even read the script? Did she even read her own lines? I don't understand. How? Just how? Filming for Heathers actually only took 33 days. For a Hollywood production, that is nothing. This was done really quickly. To be fair, Heathers was pretty low budget, having only a budget of $3 million, and it's a simple story, so it wouldn't be all too hard to film. Of course, that wasn't without its issues either, because Christian Slater apparently kept oversleeping and missing shoots. So the film probably could have been done sooner had he, set an alarm clock or something. Either way, it was finally filmed, and that was all, right? Nothing else could possibly happen to Heathers. Oh no. See, the worst thing was about to happen. Right when the film was about to get released, the production studio ran out of money. Whoops. So, you know what happens when a production studio runs out of money? They can't advertise your film. And what happens when you can't advertise your film? It bombs. Heathers had a $3 million budget, which means that if it made about $5 million, it'd be written off as a success. That's one of the benefits of having a low-budget film. It's almost impossible for it to bomb. But Heathers bombed because it only made $1 million. How do you bomb with a $3 million budget? Heathers did it. See, when they ran out of money, they were gonna try doing things like what The Room did with guerrilla marketing, with newspaper ads and merch, but it didn't really pay off. Heathers ended up failing really badly, shocking everyone. However, once it got to home media, then it became the big hit. It gathered an immediate cult following, and everyone swarmed around it talking about Heathers. Did you see Heathers? Oh, Heathers is so insane, you gotta see it. Then bam, it spawns an off-Broadway musical, a terrible Riverdale adaptation, and an awful TV anthology show. Yeah, a lot of the Heathers projects, aside from the movie, aren't very good. The only one of any quality really seems to be the musical. And then again, there's a big debate as to whether or not the movie or musical is better. But that's a topic for another day, so I won't get into that. So, with the exception of maybe Shannon Doherty, who doesn't really talk about the film all too much, everyone's really proud of it, and everyone's really happy that they went through all that to make sure it got out. Winona Ryder, Christian Slater, and especially Daniel Waters are all beaming with pride over this film. They love how good the reception is. They love the cult fandom. All of the stuff they went through made the film what it was. And the production history is one of the most beloved aspects in the Heathers fandom. People talk about it, saying that it's a miracle that this thing even got out. And yeah, if you were listening, I bet you'd agree. And no, for the record, this is not why there will never be a Heathers sequel. Daniel Waters says it's because the story is done. There doesn't need to be a sequel, and I agree. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's also my stance on a remake, but he kinda disagrees with me on that one. There's a lesson to be learned here. Say you're making a production, and it's not going so well. Your actors keep oversleeping, you can't cast the film, your production studio runs out of money. Don't give up. Stay the course. Keep fighting the good fight. Because who knows? Your production could be the very next Heathers. Well, folks, thank you very much for watching. What do you guys think of Heathers? Do you like the movie or the musical better? Comment below and let me know because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week with our Patreon raffle review.